Names are important. You know, names are what we use to identify things. A name is the first word that we begin with when we're trying to understand what a thing is. But names can also put a lot of preconceived notions into our heads before we even meet the thing. And here's the thing. This is the Fujifilm X half. This is the cool new camera that Fujifilm is releasing, and it's created quite a stir because when we first heard that name, X half, of course the speculation online was this is going to be a half frame analog camera, a lot like what Ricoh Pentax did with their 17s. And that makes a lot of sense given that we've got an OVF, which is in a vertical orientation. We've got a sensor and back panel screen in that vertical orientation, because the fact of the matter is this is not a half frame camera. The X half is ironically actually more like two cameras in one, and we're gonna explore both of those today. I'm Chris Niccolls, this is PetaPixel, and I know that you're gonna find this camera very intriguing. Did you know that KEH started in 1979? I started in 1979 too, we're the exact same age, and we both have YouTube channels. And I was actually perusing the KEH.com YouTube channel. It was very interesting. I mean, they've got all this great gear, older cameras, analog gear, and they've got lots of fantastic photographers that speak about what it's like to use this camera gear. It's really helpful because you can't always just cover the latest and greatest. Sometimes looking back into the past is a really nice way to do it. And it makes a lot of sense because KEH.com have the experts that not only know the gear inside and out and can evaluate the gear that you want to sell to them or that you want to buy from them, but also they just love photography, and that shows in the work that they do. So if you want to sell some gear, send it off to KEH.com. You know you're going to get a fair price. If you want to buy some of this fantastic used equipment, you know that KEH.com is going to give you the exact state of the gear that you're buying. There won't be any surprises, and if you get buyer's remorse, they have a generous return policy. You should definitely check out KEH.com and check out their YouTube channel. That is why KEH.com is PetaPixel's official pre-owned camera gear partner. So I generally find that anytime something's a little bit intriguing, it can also be a little bit confusing as well. And I have to admit that when I first saw this camera and then started learning about it, I was a little bit confused. I mean, let's first talk about just what is this actual camera? Is it a film camera? Not really, kind of, sort of. Is it a digital camera? Yes, but not really. I mean, it's a lot of weird things. So maybe let's just talk about the core specs and features here first, and then we'll have a better understanding before we get into how it actually feels to shoot it. Okay, first off, if you're gonna say anything about the camera, it is adorable, okay? I mean, this comes in either a silver chrome, it comes in a charcoal silver, which is what this is, or a black. And it just has that kind of design that's just so beautiful and so interesting. I mean, like, there's something about it, you can't quite put your finger on it. The Canon QL17 had it, the Contax T series had it, the Nikon S series rangefinders have it, and by God, this Fujifilm X half has it. It's just so cool to look at. It is absolutely tiny. It only 240 grams and just fits in your hand, and that's because this actually has a really small sensor. So we're looking at what we call a Type 1 sensor, okay? This is bigger than a smartphone, but way smaller than APS-C, and that's strange because actually half frame is very close physical dimensions to APS-C. This is significantly smaller. And then look at the lens. This is equally adorable. This is a 10.8 millimeter f2.8, which is gonna give us full frame equivalence of about a 32 millimeter lens, so just below that 35 mil threshold where I lose my mind, and depth of field is going to be like f7.8 equivalent. So this is actually designed to match the Fujifilm Quick Snap disposable camera's focal range, and I mean, it's about the same size. It's very compact, and it's also going to give you expansive depth of field whether you like it or not. But you can actually shoot from f2.8 to f11. They actually give you a really nice aperturing with solid quick stops. There's also an auto setting, and you get this little knob here to easily access and turn that. This lens does not have any filter threads, unfortunately, but it does also have a manual focus ring here on the front, and it's actually really damped well. And is there a little shutter hiding inside this lens? There is. There's actually a little bit of a leaf shutter in here, and this gives us anywhere from 2,000th of a second maximum shutter speed all the way down to 15 minutes, which is pretty insane. I don't see myself doing any 15-minute long exposures on here, but you can. What I don't see is a bulb setting anywhere on the camera right now, and that's okay because I haven't really figured out a way to fire this camera with remote cable release anyways, because although the shutter mechanism is threaded and I could put a soft release in there, isn't that adorable? I cannot actually put in a old school cable release. It doesn't trigger. There's no actual separate shutter mechanism underneath that threading, so that feels like a missed opportunity. Okay, so while we're on the topic of some of these controls, let's get more into how this camera handles. So it actually has a really nice little on-off switch right here in the front. It's actually very easy to just push in. You can see the thumb winder pops out here, and yes, it does have a thumb winder. I'm going to talk about that. And so that's just really handy to have everything set up ready to go. There's also a very generous exposure compensation dial here on the front. I mean, that's really nice. I can easily adjust my exposure there, and it has a nice resistance to it, so I'm not accidentally bumping it or moving it. Right below the thumb winder, I know I will get to that, I promise you, we've got still selector or the movie switch, so you can go between photo and video, and then a playback button, and that's pretty much it for controls, because before I get to that thumb winder, I really do want to talk about the displays and the screen, because that is integral to how this handles. So we don't have an EVF on this camera, but we do get an OVF, vertically oriented OVF, and it actually matches the composition on the screen quite closely from, a few feet to infinity. It's very accurate. So I'm actually finding myself bringing this up to my eye, enjoying the fairly generous magnification and getting some fun shots that way. But I can also shoot off of the LCD panel on the back. And there's actually two. Let's talk about that next. So our main LCD panel. So first off, interestingly enough, this is a 0.92 million dot display. Doesn't seem very impressive till you consider how tiny this screen is, okay? I mean, honestly, it reminds me of an actual 35 millimeter film negative in size. It's quite small, and of course, with that vertical orientation, you actually don't get to make use of the horizontal nature of the body at all, so we lose a lot of real estate that way. That is my main complaint. It is quite small. It's sharp enough, but if I'm trying to do controls on it, if I'm trying to see things like what are my settings, what my composition, I can tap to zoom in and zoom out, but with a lot of info on the display, it does feel a little bit cluttered, and I often find that I'm squinting just to kind of get an idea of what I'm shooting at. But this screen is also a big part of how I control the camera, because I have 4 directional swipes to get to different menus. So if I swipe from the left to the right, this brings up my filters. I can do my Fujifilm simulation modes, or I can do my fun toy filter effects, and I'm going to show you those in just a bit. If I swipe up, this brings up a classic Fujifilm tiles-based quick menu, and here I can access things like autofocus really easily, self-timer, eye detect, all that kind of stuff. If I swipe from right to left, this brings up my main menu, and I've got a lot of options in here to set things like power management, screen brightness, which by the way, I cranked all the way because the screen's not that bright in bright conditions. And then I actually use the secondary LCD panel here as a swipe up, swipe down selector to go through my different menu options. Finally, if I swipe from top down, this brings up my film camera mode, where I can also pair this to the app that comes with this camera. And this is what engages the secondary camera. We're going to talk about that also. Okay, now this secondary LCD screen also plays a part when we're using our film simulations and our filter effects. So if I go and I do things like use the halation or the light leaks or, miniature effect, toy camera, all that kind of stuff, I can use this to scroll up and down through all my filters. And if I go into my Fujifilm simulation modes, then I can also use this to scroll through. It actually gives me a cute little film tab, so I get that nice visual feedback on what I'm in. Classic Chrome or, Astia, Provia, Velvia, Acros, that kind of stuff. I will also say that Fujifilm's reduced a lot of the filters and film simulation modes, so I don't have to go through a ton. It's not like this huge, mindless swiping to get up and down through all this stuff. I like that they've just kind of limited it to the most popular ones available. And so those are the primary ways that you control this camera and its operation. Although I do want to say, having the screen-dependent operation, it does sometimes work, but it's not always super responsive. I find that if you swipe slowly and deliberately, it works well, but often when you're shooting, you just want to be able to flick your thumb up, down, left, right, go through menus, and I often find myself having to do it 2 or 3 times just to get it to shift and adjust there. So it's a little bit cumbersome. It takes some getting used to, and I feel like in a high-pressure, high-stakes situation, if I get flustered, I'm actually going to do more harm than good. So let's talk about the battery and the media storage here. We have the classic NPW126S batteries. These are the same ones that you're going to find in the X series cameras. They actually have a lot of life for such a small camera, and so yeah, it's nice to have those because you might already have some hanging around. And then just a single SD card slot. And speed is not a factor here because frankly this camera doesn't really do any burst shooting, and in fact a lot of the aspects of this camera are a little bit more ponderous and slow. I mean, the startup time is kind of slow, and there's just nothing fast about this camera. It kind of makes you want to just slow down and be more thoughtful about your shots. While we're talking about slow, let's talk about the autofocus because it's very basic and it does take a little bit of time to engage as well. Touching the shutter halfway, I'm basically just doing a single focus lock and then recomposing in single focus mode. I do have the option to move the area around 9 points, but they're all fairly close together. Doesn't make much difference. And there is a continuous focusing setting, but I'm not really going to use that either. This does have face eye detect though, and that can be handy when you're doing portraits. Now, of course, we've got a small sensor and a wide lens. I can actually get quite close to things here. I mean, this is not macro, but you can actually get the occasional fun little close-up here and actually get yourself about, I don't know, 4 inches away from the sensor plane. Not bad. So what manual controls do I actually have access to on this camera besides exposure compensation? How creative can I really get with it? Well, as you already know, we've got an aperture control, but we also have ISO control and shutter speed control. This is a base ISO of 200. That's our bottom level. And of course, things will get noisy pretty quick if you crank it above there. I also have the option, again, through the menu to change between shutter priority, aperture priority, full manual, or fully automatic. While we're on this topic of overall exposure, let's talk about the flash, because this does have a flash switch here for on or off, and we do have a little flash thing here in the front, but it is an LED. Again, it's not like a classic xenon bulb, and that's unfortunate because I will say this, it's very bright, brighter than what you would see on a lot of cameras, but it still doesn't give you just that stark classic flash photography look, and I think that's what a lot of people are going for. They want that old school aesthetic, and this doesn't quite mimic it. Remember also that LED lights, although they provide extra light in low light situations, you might not have to crank your ISO as high, they cannot freeze motion other than giving you a slightly faster shutter speed, whereas a flash can absolutely freeze motion, do a really good job with that. So remember too, this is a leaf shutter. We could use electronic flash for all the shutters anyways. I don't know why they don't do that. It does play another part too. I mean, it can work as a tally lamp and it can work as a continuous light for video mode and stuff like that, but it's kind of unfortunate they're still sticking with that LED. There is also, look at this, a shoe on the top of the camera, but it is a cold shoe. Why is there no center pin on there so that I could put on a classic manual flash and get that aesthetic? Or why is there no simple PC sync port on the side of the camera so I can use a manual flash and still get that look? This is again another funny oversight. I know the capacitor, the xenon bulb, they take up precious space, but give us that access then through the shoe. I honestly can't think of many reasons why I would use this or even have it on the camera if I can't use it functionally with a flash head like that. Okay, there's an aspect about this camera that's very important that I want to get across. This does not shoot RAW, this is JPEG only, and I'm cool with that because the intention of this camera is for it to be playful and fun, and I totally get that. This is not a camera that you really go back to afterwards and do a lot of stuff in post. You do it here in camera, and so there's actually a lot of fun filter effects, which I promised I would talk about. Now, a lot of these filter effects I'm going to let you explore because they're not really my jam. I mean, mirror effects and color cast effects and miniature effects. We've seen these things before, but there are some fun features here. So there's an expired film filter effect. That's neat. I can have it have a green cast or a red cast or a neutral cast. It just gives us that faded look, that kind of a slightly off exposure, and I really do dig that, and you can preview that. So a light leak effect, and I love that it's randomized. It's not something that's going to be repetitive. I'm not going to see it before I shoot. I just take a picture and I see what I get, and that's kind of neat too. There's also some interesting framing effects that you can do on this camera. So first off, buried deep inside, there's actually an option to add color bars to the side of your 3:4 ratio photos to make them square. And you can actually change the color of these bars as well. And then you'll get a square format photo without having to crop. So I mean, that's kind of a fun way to get that. But there's also a really cool 2-in-1 effect here. Because this camera's shooting vertically by its natural state, and yes, I have been turning the camera sideways once in a while just to appease Jordan, but he's already gonna be so mad. There is a way I can combine 2 vertical photos in a side-by-side 3:2 frame. And this is neat because I can actually first off decide the dividing line in between these 2 vertical shots. What does it look like? Is it clean? Is it narrow? Is it wide? Does it have sort of a rough hand-filed and larger frame effect? You can change all this stuff. But also I use that via the frame winder. So I can decide if I want the first shot to be on the left side or on the right side. And when I take my first picture, I now use the thumb winder, crank it, I get this blue little LED light, and when I take my second photo, it then combines those 2 into 1. Okay, First thing you have to keep in mind, what this means is it will only combine 2 subsequent images. So I can't take a shot and then go off and do other stuff and then crank it and go back to that. I mean, it doesn't work like that, right? You got to shoot these 2 photos in sequence. Although I can always apply this effect to just regular photos using the app afterwards to create these. And I feel like that might actually be a better way to do things. The other ramification I want to speak of is when I'm using the regular camera mode, that means I don't really use this thumb winder. In fact, it kind of is a temptation that I want to avoid, because all I'm going to do is constantly cycle between doing 2-in-1 photos or not. So I actually just push it back in, tuck it away, and I just try to ignore that it's there. But the thumb winder then becomes very integral when I go into our next mode. Okay, so that covers the basic digital camera functionality here, and at its root, it's just a fun, kind of playful experience with some manual control and some fun capability. But it goes well beyond this, because it is finally time now to go into film camera mode. And this is the maybe strangest, weirdest, but also most intriguing part of the Fujifilm X half design. The intention of this camera is to make it as aesthetically close to a film camera analog experience as possible. The first thing you have to be aware of, whatever we set when we go into film camera mode, that is permanent for that roll of film, just like if you committed to a roll of film. So first off, I have to decide what filter I'm going to use or what Fujifilm simulation mode I'm going to use. Once I've decided that, then I go into film camera mode. Now I get to choose some other options. Am I going to make this a 36 shot affair, a 54 shot affair, a 72 shot affair? And then I also have to decide things like, am I going to have date and timestamp placed on all the photos, for example? You know, I mean, all of these choices are basically be permanent until I finish that, again, air quotes, film roll, okay? Now, while I'm shooting, I'm not gonna get to see any preview or any playback or anything like that. And I use the thumb winder now not to do 2-in-1 photos, but to advance the frame to the next shot. I also have to decide what kind of exposure mode I want to do here, but this is going to be far more automatic. I can either basically set the camera to full auto, or I can have control over the aperture on the lens, and the camera's going to do the ISO and shutter speed for me. And it's not going to show me or tell me what the exposure settings are. I do have exposure comp, that does still work. I can change my aperture, but that's the extent of my manual capabilities as far as exposure goes. Otherwise, this is going to shoot a lot like a film camera, so I think it's time to engage it and just go shoot and see what we get. Okay, so I've decided for my first roll of film that I'm going to shoot today, I'm going to do across black and white, one of my favorites. I am going to commit to a yellow filter effect, and that's kind of silly. I wish you could still swipe in the across mode to choose no filter, yellow, red, or green as your options, because I could do that on a film camera. So losing a little bit of immersion there, gotta say, but otherwise, very cool interface. I see my aperture there, I see my date and time, battery life. Again, I'm not going to get a live preview while I'm shooting. And if I want to stop the roll midway, I can do that just like on a film camera. I can double tap on the film here, choose ending mid-roll. It gives me a warning, just so you know, if you choose this, we're done with this particular roll. And if I hit OK, they've actually really committed to the bit, because it even shows you on the screen the numbers like rewinding and then going to blank, but just like you would have on like a film camera display. That's very adorable. It's very cute. I love that. So I can't see any of these shots as well. Once I take this roll of film, it's compartmentalizing those images onto my SD card in a separate folder. And although I could go on my computer and then see that folder and see all the images afterwards, if I really want to get the full effect, I would then develop these in the app. Okay, let's go shoot some black and white. Yeah. So while I'm shooting this film camera mode, the camera's autofocusing, but I don't get any indication of my focusing point. So there's a backup. Just off the side of your peripheral vision, you can see a little yellow LED light up. That means the camera has now focused. And then I just gotta listen for the shutter itself to kind of confirm that I've taken a shot. That can be a little bit tricky in like loud, noisy areas like here by the street. But I'll also then see the film advance go to number 2 or number 3 or whatever. So that also gives me an indication that I actually did take a photograph. The other thing I want to mention, if I turn the camera off and then turn it on again, I'm still in film camera mode. It just picks up where it left off. So one thing I'm noticing here, I mean, I love this thumb winder, but sometimes if I advance it too quickly or too soon after taking a shot, it doesn't register. And I'm so used to shooting and immediately winding, and I really got to slow that down, because otherwise I get this blinking red light saying, you can't take a photo, you haven't wound it yet, dummy. And that's a little bit annoying. Also, I do dig the thumb winder. I mean, this is an aesthetic I've been asking for a long time, but there's no haptic feedback to it. There's no like ratchet, there's no sort of resistance. It's pretty smooth, and you know, it kind of feels a little bit toyish. So I don't know, I kind of wish there was a little bit more of like a resistance to that. Okay, so we definitely have to talk about the new Fujifilm app for the X1/2 camera. This is camera specific, and I would really say this is basically integral to operating the camera, especially in film camera mode, because this is how you develop that film, so to speak, and make contact sheets. You heard me right, you can actually make your own contact sheets, you can customize the look of them, you can save them, print them, all that kind of stuff. Lots of fun like that. This is also how, of course, you're just gonna move photos from the camera to the phone if you want to. You can do things like make these 2-in-1 shots out of existing photos. I think that's far more useful than doing it in camera. I can look at my whole gallery and say, I think these two photos have an interesting interplay, and then put those together. And again, customize the border, customize the width of it, the color, and the type of it. But I think the most important thing about the app is really that it gives you that feeling of shooting analog film. You know, you don't get the instant gratification of seeing your shots right away. So there's that joy of shooting an entire roll of film on the camera, and then maybe sitting down in a quiet place, loading up the app, and then seeing all of those photos come out on a contact sheet. That's a really neat experience. That's actually an experience that I do miss, and I have to admit, the app gave me a few little nostalgic pangs there that I really enjoyed. So I was in film camera mode, I got so used to double stroking this thing, and now I'm back in regular camera mode, and I keep like, you know, winding the thumb lever, and of course, all that's doing is putting me into massive 2-in-1 shots all over the place. It's pretty complicated for a simple camera, to be honest with you.
All right, it's Jordan to talk about the video functionality on this camera, but I'm gonna have to do it really quick because this thing just has internal microphones on it. You can adapt the USB-C for headphones, but not microphones for some reason, and this only shoots 24 frames per second exactly, so that means my audio is eventually gonna fall completely out of sync. So I'm gonna try and make this quick. As you can see, I chose to shoot this in the vertical format because that is what you're naturally going to want to shoot, but it's vertical 4:3, an aspect ratio that's never been used for any video display ever in history. Like maybe if you flipped a CRT on its side, it's actually useful. And it says it records full HD, but you know what? 1440 by 1080, that's not full HD. That's kind of sort of HD video. It doesn't look very good on this. It's nice that you've got all of the different filters you can use in photo. We'll work on this, but let's look at the light leak, for example. In video, if you have a light leak, you might pan past the sun and it'll change, but this just looks like someone slapped a JPEG on top of your video clip. Okay, sorry about that. Chris just informed me that this actually stops recording at 55 seconds into clip, so audio drift isn't actually that much of a problem, and that the autofocus was absolutely losing its mind. So we've switched to manual focus with this. Like, let's just cut to the chase. Don't use this thing for video. Just pull your phone out if you want to record some video clips, because it's not giving you a unique experience recording that. I would honestly just put some gaff tape on the photo video switch and keep it stuck in photo.
Okay, I figured it out. This winder's kind of been bugging me all day because it doesn't always register, especially if I try to wind right after taking a shot. Kind of have to slow down and take my time. Or I just treat this like a Leica M3 double stack winder, and I just crank that twice. That's working pretty good. So the Fujifilm X1/2 is doing something that I have been asking for a long time, and that is to sort of mimic more of the analog shooting experience and bring that into a modern digital camera. And I mean, look, I gotta be honest with you, I am struggling a little bit with my experience here on this camera, and maybe it's just the day. I don't know, maybe it's me, but I think it's more than that. I think, first off, sexy as f. I mean, this camera is gorgeous, it's a great size, it's truly pocketable. I love the design. I think anybody who plays with it is just gonna instantly fall in love with how it's built and how it's made and how it handles. Where I'm struggling with it is that this camera is essentially about play, and I think any serious photographer coming to this is gonna maybe struggle a little bit, because there are certain things that you might be wanting for and certain things you might want it to do more of. And I gotta remember that this is a camera for playing with. So is it a fun experience? Yes. Am I having a unique shooting experience? Yes. Where I think I'm struggling with this camera is when it comes to the just immersion of feeling like I'm shooting an analog camera. I mean, look, I'm actually really enjoying the main camera version of this, like, the digital version of this, where I can go back and forth between black and white or color at will. I can try different filters. I have the screen as a compositional tool when I want it. I can see my photos in playback, and I have a little bit more manual control. I'm actually really enjoying that experience, and I think this becomes a fun, pocketable camera. Yeah. The image quality is nothing to write home about, but that was never the point, and I understand that. My smartphone will take better photos than this, but this is about having fun with grain and filter effects and things like that. When it comes to the film camera part, this is where I'm struggling a little bit, because this camera is not quite optimized. It's still a little bit clunky, a little bit ponderous, a little bit cumbersome, and you have to go slow with it. And I have to remember that if I'm using the film camera mode, those issues that I'm having are just exaggerated more so when I'm using the film camera mode, because I don't know if it's quite acquired focus, and I don't know if I've wound the thumb winder on properly or enough, or sufficiently to reset the camera, and there's a bit of a delay between shooting and taking the picture, and I don't know if I'm totally pre-focused in the right spot. And so I guess that's kind of the point, is just to let go, let the camera do its thing, worry less. And I think if you go into that mindset, then this camera does actually shine quite well. But the immersion's not quite there, and that's taking some of the fun of it away for me. But I'll just leave you with this last part here, okay? The Fujifilm X half is a love letter, okay? It is a declaration of love from a very skilled Fujifilm designer for all things analog and everything that goes along with that. And whether that love remains unrequited or you return the love to this camera, whether you enjoy this experience or not and choose to have a relationship with this camera or not, the fact of the matter is the love for analog is apparent in this camera design, and it is genuine. I'm very eager to see your feedback in the comments on this interesting camera and what your opinion is of the design and the functionality of it. Hopefully this gave you guys a lot of information about this camera and helps you decide if it's right for you, if it's a fun distraction or a fun tool or something you'd enjoy using. We're going to talk about it on the PetaPixel podcast for sure, so you should definitely check that out as well. Stay on the same channel. You can watch it or listen to it on all your favorite podcasting apps. We love both. And if you sign up for a PetaPixel membership, you actually get to peruse the website ads-free, and you get big discounts on the merch store. You're going to love that. You also get to see all the sample galleries from all the stuff that we review. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you soon with more on PetaPixel.